Welcome to United We Spay, the show dedicated to promoting affordable spay-neuter services nationwide. Each episode delves into the heart of the movement, sharing inspiring stories and driving positive change. Our goal is to raise awareness, educate, and empower, addressing overpopulation's root causes to ensure every animal has a chance for a better life. Hosted by Stacy and the United Spay Alliance team, we're on a mission to change lives. Fed up with the fixation on symptoms in the animal welfare conversation, it's time to change the narrative. Join us on United We Spay, where we make a difference by spreading knowledge and building a compassionate world for animals. Let's put prevention first and spotlight spay-neuter in the animal welfare space.
You're listening to United We Spay, a podcast from the United Spay Alliance. United Spay Alliance works to promote accessible, affordable, and timely spay-neuter services because an ounce of prevention today can prevent untold suffering tomorrow. Spay-neuter, it's public health for pets. I am Stacy United Spay Alliance board member and host of the show. And today we are speaking with Vicki Deisner as well as Dan Spehar. Vicki is the executive director and founder of Ohio Animal Advocates. Ohio Animal Advocates' mission is to make Ohio a place where all animals are protected from cruelty, abuse, and neglect. OAA leads, creates policy that protect animals and work to ensure that humane laws are vigorously enforced. OAA also establishes relevant and practical solutions to take on seemingly insurmountable animal cruelty issues. By challenging and changing entrenched systems that harm animals, OAA elevates animal protection concerns from a fringe issue to one taken seriously by the public and policymakers who are beginning to understand the deep connection between the welfare of animals and that of society overall. We also have Dan Spehar, who's a freelance research, data, and communication specialist. Much of his work has focused on the management of community cats. Dan has co-authored 8 published peer-reviewed articles on the subject, and he has presented findings at national and regional conferences. Dan is co-founder of the Together Initiative for Ohio's Community Cats. He leads the Together Initiative in advocating for the humane management of Ohio's community cats via public education and efforts to promote collaboration among stakeholders. Since 2013, Dan has served as a senior humane policy volunteer leader for the Humane Society of the United States, a role that allows him to work for the humane treatment of all animals via public policy initiatives. Dan holds a bachelor's degree in communication and a master's degree in animal policy. Dan, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thanks, Stacy. Glad to be here.
And Vicki, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stacy. Glad to be here.
So, Dan, first and foremost, how did you get to be so passionate about spay-neuter?
Well, I'm passionate about spay-neuter because I have a particular passion for community cats. And as we know, the most important thing we can do for community cats is either getting them spayed or neutered. So that's the motivation behind my passion.
And because of the fact that that is one of the only solutions to help with reducing cat overpopulation?
Yes, absolutely. The data that's out there and the research that's out there shows that trap-neuter-return and spay-neuter essential to trap-neuter-return is the only humane and effective method of managing community cats.
And Vicki, how did you get to be so passionate about spay-neuter?
Well, as following up on what Dan said, really, this is an opportunity to work with local officials to give them a win-win situation. Because when you trap, neuter, and release, you are over time reducing that population and reducing the nuisances that certain people complain about. So it's a way really to create an opportunity of collaborative effort between local officials who are looking to, satisfy all citizens, but actually for a group of citizens to come in and help and work with their government.
Very exciting to me. About a year ago or so, I was able to participate in one of your cat summits that you held. It was in Cleveland. And I'm just wondering if maybe, Dan, if you could share a little bit about these community cat summits, how they originated, why are they so important in Ohio?
Well, the Together Initiative back in 2015, we held our first summit. What our hope was to bring community cat stakeholders together, not only TNR practitioners, but rescue groups, shelter volunteers, shelter workers, animal control officers, humane officers, bring all these stakeholders together at an educational event where there could be networking involved as well, so people could see each other's perspectives and learn from each other and make connections with each other. So we've held 6 of those all together, the last several in connection with Ohio Animal Advocates. After the pandemic, we held 2 virtual events in 2021 and 2022, but this year was our first in-person event again. And we were very grateful for Stacy to come and speak to the group. That was a wonderful presentation. But what we try to offer is kind of a condensed version of what you might get at an animal care expo or a best friends event, but on a local level. So you also have that local feel with the local connection to the events that are happening locally and the people that are working locally. We had about 60 people at the most recent event, but these are not just folks that, decide, hey, let's spend a few hours on a Saturday hearing about community cats. These are all difference makers in their communities. I had a marketing professor long time ago, but he used to call these centers of influence. So these folks are not only at the event, but they go back into their communities and they influence other people in their communities. They teach them what they learned and make them aware of the connections that they've made at these events. So we might only talk to 60 or 80 people at one of these events, but we affect far more people than that. Just really quickly, we try to offer educational presentations like Stacy's, who gave a big picture overview of community cat management and discussion of salient issues. We talked about the current vet shortage that's affecting Ohio like it's affecting the rest of the country, and to offer model solutions. We had one local success story from New London, Ohio, where the community got together and they allowed somebody who was an expert on TNR to come in and teach them how to handle the really significant community cat issue that they had going on there. And then in Cincinnati, we had Karen Little from Louisville come in and talk about building robust municipal partnerships. So people got to take those things from the summit and go back and implement them in their communities. And then we had instructional presentations. Tabitha Kucera, who's a cat behaviorist, told us, the audience there, how to handle kittens and the best way to address kitten issues with community cats. And then we also try to have hands-on experiences. At both events, we had a mobile spay-neuter clinic come in, and the attendees got to tour those facilities, which they wouldn't be able to do when a facility comes in to do their work because they just wouldn't have time to do that. They're too busy spaying and neutering the cats. At these events, they were able to go in, and Dr. Michelle Gonzalez and Dr. Joanna Reen in Cincinnati showed their facilities to the attendees, and it was really well received. And I was so glad that we were able to do that this year.
One thing that struck me tremendously attending the summit was the variety of different solutions that were out there, based on the location of where the cat overpopulation was or where the resources have been lacking for many years. Dan, you have done some strategic work analyzing Ohio. And then also Dr. Gonzalez from the Rascal Unit also did a presentation looking at the state as a whole strategically, understanding that we need to have target projects in certain areas of the state, but you're really looking at the whole state. Does that come from sort of the Together initiatives, desires to really look, have the state as the balcony view, I guess I would ask?
Yeah, what our hope is to influence people to adopt humane management of community cats across the state. So last year, in coordination with Ohio Animal Advocates, we took on this project of finding out where the resources are in Ohio. So we put together a directory of resources by county. And as we did that, we discovered where the resources were distributed across the state. And by doing so, we discovered there were counties that were what we're calling resource deserts. We broke it down between spay-neuter resources and TNR resources. So spay-neuter resources, they're either doing surgeries or directly linking people to those surgeries. TNR resources were trapping cats, returning cats, et cetera. So in addition to those 21% of the counties that were total resource deserts, they had no resources on the TNR side or the spay-neuter side. An additional 6 counties, are taking up to 27%, had no spay-neuter resources for community cats. So our hope is to address those issues by identifying those areas. And what Dr. G did, she built upon the map that we put together that color-coded the counties based upon the level of resource availability in those counties. And she showed, based upon her work, anecdotally, how those areas matched up with her personal experience running the Rascal unit. And then one step further, one of the potential ways to address that lack of spay-neuter resources was mentioned in her podcast by the dean of the Ohio State Veterinary School. He thought that it would be a good idea to enroll more students from these desert areas into the program at Ohio State. And then she was able to show on the most recent class at Ohio State where the enrollment, what counties the enrollees came from. And so far, they haven't been able to address those issues because there are virtually no enrollees from those desert counties.
So, Vicki, I want to ask you, why is it important for Ohio animal advocates to get involved in the list of resources that your organization's providing in a variety of different, your advocacy, you're providing pet assistance for struggling families, domestic violence, wildlife. You have a long list of services that your organization provides. Why is it so important that your organization be involved in this work that Dan is doing?
Well, besides the fact that it's a key priority for OAA, we are also the state partner for United Spay Alliance. So one thing we identified early on when we started was just there wasn't a statewide, resource list for a lot of things people were looking for. And particularly we did this entering the pandemic when, spay-neuter services were down. People were looking for food for their animals. So we have pet food pantries, which was really utilized during the pandemic, spay-neuter, TNR, wildlife rehabbers, safe havens to get animals out of domestic violence situations, where to report cruelty. And I bring that up because that is one of the most important lists, oddly enough, because Ohio has this odd situation where in so many states you have an animal control officer and a county and a pound that takes care of all of its animals. And so the process is consistent across the board, not so in Ohio. They have humane officers in the cities where the well-funded humane societies are able to have them. But, that doesn't exist outside because it isn't government funded. It's either a contract with the city or grants or whatever those humane societies can raise. So instead of animal control officers, they have dog wardens in each county and a pound that only takes in dogs. And so when you get out into the rural areas, if you have humane societies that only are run by volunteers, you don't have humane officers. So who you report cruelty to falls either to the police, to the sheriff, or somehow back to the dog warden. So it's different in every county. So people really need that specific information. But that also flows over to show why the rural issue about community cats is so important, because when it comes to cruelty, they fall between the cracks.
And I'm also going to ask about dogs and, the accessibility of spay-neuter for dogs in Ohio. I interviewed your friend, our colleague over in Indiana, Cheri Storms, and they have significant challenges getting affordable, accessible spay-neuter for especially the large dogs. Is that true in Ohio too?
Absolutely. And, what you do see in these county dog pounds is mainly pit mixes too, unfortunately, the larger pit mixes in that. So actually a recent program that Cheri is working on, which really is emphasizing and concentrating on helping the pit mixes, is so important. And in Ohio, I'm ways to go to get to that because of this unfortunate legal dilemma we're in. And if you want to look at laws that we need to change, that's one of them. We need to go to animal control officers in each county, just like the other states do, and move from there. We also, to give Cheri a big, congratulations. She's got one of the best programs across the country regarding, the spay-neuter her services. She literally is able to satisfy the financial needs of low-income people throughout the state. At the time, when I was working with Cheri there in Indiana, we ran a mandated spay-neuter bill, and we were able to do that because at the time she covered 85% of the cost of things in Indiana for people, and it phased in over 5 years, and we knew by that point she would be able to cover it entirely. In Ohio, we'd love to have a process like that. Every state would love to have a process like that. She's really a model for the nation.
In addition to being the statewide leader for Ohio, you have mentioned that you and Cheri in Indiana and Diane Parrish, our state leader in Kentucky, you've kind of created a bit of a mini team, I guess I would say. So, in addition to collaborating with others all around the country at our United Spay Alliance quarterly meetings, you have this 3-state partnership where you've collaborated on a lot of different events together. Would you be willing to share what those are?
Sure, absolutely. And would like to point out that February of 2024, we went ahead and we, collaborated actually on the first tri-state virtual workshop to actually, do the networking, unfortunately virtually, but across those state lines, which is important. And I want to point out and thank our supporters, Kenneth Scott Trust in Cleveland and Joni Bernard Foundation in Cincinnati. And, there are really a lot of, shared experiences between the states, but a lot of different ones that we can learn, might say winning strategies and losing strategies that we don't want to follow. But we're lucky to be able to all work together.
That's great. One of the presentations, Dan, I'm going to ask you about, because I thought it was such a fascinating story at the summit where I was presenting, was about the AlterClinic. And here we are at a time where we hear all about veterinary shortage. We can't grow our capacity. Clinics can't grow. They're actually closing, or, a 4 veterinary clinic is now down to 1 veterinarian. And so we have organizations saying, hey, it's okay to adopt out unspayed or neutered cats or dogs because we don't have the spay-neuter capacity. And then we had this wonderful presentation about the AlterClinic in Ohio in a very challenging time. And it seemed like her practice grew quite a bit. Can you share that story?
Yeah, it's really an inspirational story. Laura Groves, who really didn't have direct experience in spay-neuter, decided, after a career change, that she wanted to open a spay-neuter clinic because there was a need in Stark County, which is in the Canton. Canton is in Stark County. So she put together a team and they opened this spay-neuter clinic. And she's gone through much trial and error, and she's suffered setbacks. But as I think her slogan was, don't give up, adapt. And so she would try again each time, and she would adapt her model. And she has really grown the availability of spay-neuter, not only for community cats, which is one of the central reasons that she started it, but for pet animals as well. So they do pet cats, they do wellness, they do pet dogs and community cats, and you don't even need an appointment. So trappers and individuals and rescues can bring in these animals, and they're taken care of at her clinic. And I know she's going to be expanding again next year. If somebody wants a copy of her presentation, they can reach out to me at my email, which is communitycatsohio@gmail.com, and I will supply that to them, and I think they'd really find it useful.
It was truly a fascinating story. She is not a veterinarian. She didn't have any experience. And I think these are the stories that we need to share, because so many people feel like, oh, I have to be a veterinarian. I have to be a trained practice manager to be able to start up a spay-neuter clinic, or to be able just to help cats in my community. It doesn't have to be a full clinic. You could do once a month spay-neuter events at a private practice clinic in your town, and use their facility on a Sunday. You bring in all your totes with all your supplies and your volunteer veterinarians. You can do that very easily without having much experience. There are training guides out there for that kind of stuff. So it really is an efficient and effective way to work, even in a rural environment as well as more urban environment. But her story was, I think the first thing she said is, I don't have a budget, but I make it work. And I was like, woo, wow. And so, but you know what? If she can make it work, and the perseverance, I love that. Don't give up, adapt. She's like, I'm learning as I go along, but She's got it's a for-profit business. It's not a non-for-profit. It's a mission-serving business, and she's making a success out of it. And so it is possible. I just want to convey that if you have the desire, don't let someone else tell you you can't do it. That's what's so important, is that we can all make a difference by increasing our spay-neuter capacity. So, we have creative solutions at the United Spay Alliance's website. Folks can go there. Folks can reach out to Dan to get copies of her presentation. And I know, Dan, you've done so much research all across the state that, if someone has a question about trying to start an initiative, I bet you know where to find that information to grow capacity in their county. So, if I had a colony of 20 cats in my backyard and I couldn't find a place to get them done in my county, I might start a Sunday spay-neuter clinic. I mean, that is what I did in the 90s. I started Sunday spay-neuter clinics in Massachusetts because people were calling me from all parts of Massachusetts saying, I have to pay $120, $150 per cat, and I have 10, 20 cats in my backyard, and that's just not reasonable. And so you have to trap them and take them into your shelter. And my shelter could only hold 40 cats. And so I said, well, I can't take them all in, but what if I got them fixed for free? How would that sound? Oh, that would be great. Maybe I can find homes for them. Maybe I can set up a little house for them. So it gave them an opportunity, the community, an opportunity to help the cats by creating that resource. And that was not hard for me. It was gathering 5 people together, and they started the committee that, runs those clinics. So, you have to ask. If you don't ask, you're not gonna find out whether you can create a solution. Dan, I want to ask you if you could share another story from that summit about New London. That was another example. We have all these different strategic approaches to communities' problems with cat overpopulation. What happened in New London in Ohio?
Yeah, well, that's actually interrelated with AlterClinic, because New London is a small community, probably about 50 miles south of Cleveland. And I was given a call by Crystal Riggy, who runs Riggy Rescue. And she was contacted by the residents there. And she was trying to set up a organized effort to spay and neuter these cats in this very small community. So when I went there to help her with a council meeting, you could just see the cats were everywhere in the yards. I mean, a lot of times, those stories are exaggerated. It was not exaggerated here. There were just cats running and jumping and sitting everywhere. So we were able to convince the city council that they should give Crystal a shot to establish this program there, which she's done. And, she's done the work. I just helped a little bit in getting it started. But since then, she has trained the folks who live there, and they've been very receptive to do this on their own. So when she initially held a mass trapping event, and AlterClinic drove a van 3 counties over, picked up the cats that they trapped, drove them back to their clinic, had them spayed or neutered, kept them overnight, and then drove them back again so they could be released. So in coordination with AlterClinic, Riggy Rescue was able to reduce the population there significantly to begin with, and train the folks along the way while they were doing that to continue that effort themselves. And now that's been going on for a year or so, and the problem there is no longer nearly what it was, and it's on the way to being now at all.
That's great. That's fantastic. Vicki, if folks are interested in finding out more about your summits, virtual or in person, and what's going on with Ohio Animal Advocates, how would they do that?
If people would look at www.ohioanimaladvocates.org, you can go to our homepage. You can see on the navigation bar all the statewide resources, how to get active, how to address an action alert, and the 8 major programs that we have, which would be puppy mills, community cats, adequate shelter for animals that are outdoors, breed discrimination, wildlife protection, pet protection, pet assistance for low-income people, and in addition, humane education. And we do during the summer, because we're an organization that we don't interact directly with animals. We do a lot of policy work, but we do real Ohio tours in the summer to animal sanctuaries to give people a chance to get out, to meet, network, and actually see some of the good work that's going on the ground regarding sanctuaries for animals.
You also host the United Spay Alliances and Ohio Animal Advocates spay-neuter listing of spay-neuter resources.
That's the Ohio Spay-Neuter Connection page.
Fantastic. Excellent. Dan, if folks only had one takeaway from listening to our conversation today, what should it be?
Because I've done a lot of research related to community cats, I would say collect data and share the data. It can be helpful in so many ways to uncovering resources, connecting resources so they can work together, or just identifying problems and funding for those problems. So I would say, again, collecting and sharing data.
And when you say that, it's not only collecting information like the shelter's intake numbers and that kind of stuff, because we're talking community cats, and a lot of these community cats, they never make it to a shelter, really. So there's other resources like the number of spay-neuter clinics or the availability of affordable spay-neuter, the number of rescues and shelters in the area. So it's almost like a resource mapping is almost more important than calculating specifically the number of community cats that are out there. That is like a bird count situation, right? And that's very labor intensive and very hard. So if you are, a small organization looking at one county, it would be more focusing on what are the resources available to us.
Right. And to know what the capacity of those resources are. So getting AlterClinic's numbers, getting those MASH spay-neuter events numbers, getting the mobile units numbers, and then, putting all those together and then mapping it out to see what resources are available and what areas need help.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. I always talk about tribal knowledge. So you can do some base level guesstimates. I usually start with taking the population of the county and times it by 20%. And that will give me the number of what community cats are in the community. And then based on historical knowledge of what's happening in that county, I will flex it up or down. That's just how I have done it in the past, but other people may have different strategies, but doing something is better than nothing. And then you can adjust from there as you run your programs and evaluate it. So I just want people to understand that they shouldn't feel overwhelmed by this prospect because it doesn't have to be perfect. Community cat number management is messy. We'll agree with that to begin with. And we have an objective, whether it's 1,000 cats or 10,000 cats, that's good to know of your scale. But then once you get your number, you can adjust it over time and see how you're impacting the situation there. All right. Well, I want to thank you both. Vicki, you have something you'd like to share with us as we close?
Yeah, just as we close, one other thing. If you go on the Ohio Spay-Neuter Connection page and the community cat part of Ohio Animal Advocates, you will find resources such as a guide to how to work with your municipality to pass positive local ordinances to help community cats. You will find the recordings of all of our virtual community cat summits and other important information. And so just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to the show today. If you liked this episode, be sure to share and subscribe. We'll be releasing a new episode each month, digging into important conversations surrounding spay-neuter throughout the U.S. and around the world. For more resources for spay-neuter and learn more about our work at unitedspayalliance.org, that is United, S-P-A-Y, alliance.org. Get in touch with us anytime by emailing info@unitedspayalliance.org. Until next time, thank you.